Hi, this is John Burroughs again, and I'm going to continue with my autobiography, 7 Years to Life. This is chapter 51. It's Capital Tire / SLP and Associates / sales. Excuse me. This segment is both a philosophical intermission and a story combined. Let me begin with my philosophy about sales. I also need an emotional break after writing the last two stories. At 42nd Avenue Shell, they paid commission on what you sold that were over and above your salary. I realized that I would never partake in higher education opportunities, meaning I would never obtain a degree. This was not an unwelcome realization, and the idea of additional compensation through selling intrigued me immensely. The station was where I cut my teeth on selling. When Russ made me the service manager, the opportunity to make considerably more money, due to the fact it would be my job to sell needed repair jobs that were more expensive by far than I could make selling the occasional service on the pump islands. Russ provided most of my sales training, and that was based on his experiences and what worked for him. I did increase my income by more than I could have possibly expected. From that point on, I knew my career would always involve selling, with rare exceptions. All my life I have been a good salesman, but I knew very early on that I would never be a great one. Assuming you associate sales greatness with earnings, then you have to ignore your conscience. The great ones always found that easy to do, but for the few times in my career when I was confronted with losing a sale because I knew what I was selling would only benefit me and not my customer, I would fail. I am thankful that I always let my conscience be my guide. I have a belief system that when it comes to selling, that often made me walk away or get let go from jobs because I never bought into the philosophy of it doesn't matter how you make the sale as long as you close it. I hate to acknowledge it, but by denying it would be ridiculous. There are far too many businesses out there today that if you peel back the onion, that philosophy is the cornerstone of their sales process. You know the type of person I'm talking about. We've all experienced it in some fashion at one time or another. Here's what I needed to sell anything successfully. First and foremost, the product or service would have to provide true mutual benefit for my customer and myself. Secondly, I had to respect who or what company I was selling for. Thirdly, the cost of the product had to be priced fairly, allowing for a decent profit and not whatever you could get away with. Finally, I have never been greedy, so being filthy rich never appealed to me, because that type of wealth usually has some degree of guilt associated with it. I wanted to have a comfortable lifestyle for my family, but I did not want to be consumed by greed. All of these conditions had to be met, and when they were, I was very successful. But finding a job that truly met all these conditions were rare. Simply stated, most great salespeople are predators, a la Donald Trump. I am not. The following story hopefully will adequately describe what I mean in the aforementioned paragraphs. 42nd Avenue Shell was located down the street from a business called Capital Tire. It was a true discount tire warehouse, and their prices were unbeatable. They also sold shock absorbers. Capital Tire did not have the resources or room to mount and balance their tires or install shock absorbers. We negotiated an agreement with them where the installation work would be completed by us, also at a greatly discounted price. I should mention that the reason they were able to sell tires lower than anyone else was because they sold Capital brand tires, yet they did not manufacture the tires. Their tires were manufactured for them by reputable manufacturers such as Michelin, Goodyear, General Tire, and sold under the Capital Tire name. When you buy major brand tires, even at the wholesale level, the price of the tires have the manufacturer's advertising costs rolled in. Advertising, especially TV and radio advertising, is one of the heaviest cost burdens that manufacturers have to endure. Capital Tire was able to get the lowest prices from the manufacturers because the advertising costs were not added. Due to our relationship, the manager of the Capital Tire store offered me a job where my earning potential was higher, and I only had to work 40 hours a week. I went and spoke with Russ about it, and he said that I would be foolish if I passed up the opportunity. He also assured me that as long as he owned the business, I could come back any time. This was one of the few good things that happened to me at the time. The new job was also a perfect fit for my sales requirement. Capital Tire was also the place where I met SPL. SPL are the initials for the owner's name of SPL&Associates. SPL was the public relations firm for Capital Tire when I was working there. He was a public relations person for Capital Tire when I was working there. He was rarely in his office, and the natural assumption, at least to me, was that the bulk of public relations work took place outside of the office. I was doing very well at Capital Tire, and after 3 months or so, I was consistently one of the top 2 salespeople in the region. SPL came up to me one day and said that he was very impressed with my sales numbers. He then invited me to lunch that we scheduled a week from our conversation. It was at lunch that I learned quite a bit about SPL. He left Poland and journeyed to the United States many years earlier and did everything that was required of him in order to become a U.S. citizen. America offered him more opportunities than any place in the world to become wealthy. I think if he could become wealthy without freedom, he would have not cared. To him, wealth was freedom. He told me he lived for 8 years in New York City where he met Michael C., who was the son of an Italian immigrant, and they started a business where each of them were equal partners. They also decided that the business could dramatically increase its profitability in California, so they moved the business there. After about 6 months in California, they began to have differences of opinion on business strategies, and this conflict led to the demise of their business, and they each went their separate ways. I met Michael C. once, and to say he was a young, extremely handsome man who loved to party would be an understatement. He had the obligatory Porsche 911S and a girlfriend from Sweden that was so beautiful that it was hard to take your eyes off of her. And if you had any hope of avoiding gawking at her, those hopes were quickly dashed because the way she dressed was so incredibly provocative that she could make the Pope forget his vows of celibacy. It was obvious that coke, sex, and partying were the things Michael chose to spend his profits from the business. It appeared Michael had no idea of one of the most basic principles of any business. Depending on the business, it was necessary to throw some of those profits back into the business. SPL was similar to Michael in very few ways. They both loved money, and they both found beautiful women irresistible. SPL was different because his wife was unbelievably attractive, but it was in a classy, sophisticated way. There are only 2 other women that I had the opportunity to meet and know that could match the physical beauty of these 2 women, and they were my first wife, Georgia, and my present wife, Christina. All 4 of these women in their youthful prime, from a sheer physical beauty viewpoint, are so rare that since then I have yet to meet anyone that looked as good as these women looked. I only mention this because immediately after meeting Georgia, SBL asked if I was willing to wife swap, and I knew if he had ever met my present wife, he would have asked the very same thing. He was sexist, to say the least. In fact, he only hired 1 female salesperson that was pretty cute herself. When I asked him what motivated him to hire her, he said, "When I interviewed her, I asked her many questions. The number of questions I asked her was disguised to mask the audacity of the only question where the answer was all that I was interested in. I asked what was that most important question. He answered smiling. I answered if she would be willing to sleep with a potential client in order to seal the deal. She answered with one word without any hesitation. Absolutely. Lynn was her name, and she was a nympho. SBL asked me one time if I would go to her office to help her with a client she had an appointment with one afternoon. I did go and sit in on that appointment, and with 5 minutes of the appointment's conclusion, she was saying how horny I made her feel, and she wanted me to do the deed right there in her office. The offer was tempting, but I was still married to Georgia, and regardless of the problems we were having, I could not bring myself to doing it. I remember my close friends calling me a fool for the obvious reasons. However, the purpose of the lunch was so SBL could offer me a job with SBL&Associates in a private setting. He offered me the opportunity to be a sales executive with SBL&Associates, and that in the next few weeks he would be resigning from Capital Tire to concentrate fully on SBL&Associates. I told him that I needed to know more about his company in order to make my decision. He told me that SBL&Associates provided services to those people who had a strong desire to start their own business or to expand their existing business. I asked exactly what is it that you do for your customers. He told me that his company provided the expertise to help business people get the necessary financing to start or expand their businesses by putting together a professional proposal that any lender, public or private, would need to see before investing in any business. The proposal would cover the 3 most crucial attributes that any lender would be looking for in a potential borrower. Those 3 things were security, experience, and the ability to repay the loan within the terms agreed upon. Security, of course, was any tangible assets such as a house, a car, or the business itself that could be used as collateral for the loan. Experience was of paramount importance because depending on the type of business you were intending to open or expand, you had to know what the hell you were doing. Finally, the ability to repay the loan was largely based on the credit history of the potential owners or co-signers. Most people were chasing their dreams when starting a business or expanding a business. However, in most cases, they did not know the first thing about preparing a proposal, and that is where SBL&Associates stepped in, for a fee, of course. Typically, a proposal consisted of 3 sections. The first section is what we call the narrative or anecdotal section. This section closely resembled the short story of the owner, owners, or co-signers, and why, in a narrative form, they fully deserved the financing. The salesperson usually authored this section of the proposal after detailed interviews with the borrowers. It was important that in this section that the race, sex, and military status of the borrowers was revealed, especially if the proposal was going to be presented to the Small Business Administration, because, quite frankly, the government was dying to lend money at the time to minorities, women, and veterans, especially Vietnam-era veterans. To put what I am writing in proper perspective would be to say if you were an American Indian female and a Vietnam vet, you were virtually guaranteed a loan from the SBA. You still had to have the other qualifications in the proposal, but if you met the qualifications that I just described, I doubt the remainder of the proposal was even read. The second section was the accounting section. This meant you had to provide SBL&Associates with any important relevant financial information. You were required to turn over a personal financial statement if you were starting a business, and if you were looking to expand, you needed only to provide a personal financial statement in addition to a business financial statement. This would allow our accounting department, which consisted of 1 man, to provide the financial information for the proposal, such as the amount of money you were looking to borrow, a forecast of profit and loss, a cash flow analysis, and the competitive impact of the market you were planning to do business in. So now, the narrative section painted an enticing picture of how intelligent, hardworking, and experienced the borrowers were, and the accounting section supposedly supported those narratives with real numbers and trends. The legal section, which typically was the last section of the proposal, laid out in plain language all the legal parameters that needed to be adhered to, such as safety issues, tax codes, discrimination, etc. Our accounting person? Well, he was also the legal expert. He had graduated from law school and was attempting to pass the bar exam for the second time. Essentially, a finished proposal appeared to have taken a considerable amount of time and expertise to complete, when the whole process from start to finish on most proposals was an hour to an hour and a half. The way we marketed ourselves was through the ad sections in local newspapers. The ad would say something like, "Looking to start a business or expanding an existing business? If so, call so-and-so at 555-555-5555 to schedule an appointment for an interview." A face-to-face appointment was critical to a successful sale. I should mention that SBL always found office space in law offices, and usually for a pittance extra, he would get the receptionist to answer our line, SLP&Associates. SBL always felt, and he was probably right, that a client felt more at ease when they entered the law office. Here's an example of how a sale was completed from start to finish. Client Bob calls the law office where I am located, and the receptionist answers, "SBL&Associates." Bob asks for me and then is transferred to my line. Bob tells me that he's seriously considering starting a business but is nervous because even though he has vast experience in the field, he does not have nearly enough money to get started, and then he follows this up with a barrage of questions. At this point, I interrupt by telling him that something like this needed to be discussed in person, not over the phone. Bob agrees. We schedule an appointment in my office and what information I will need for the appointment. The appointment should run roughly an hour. Bob shows up a little early, and the receptionist buzzes me to tell me my appointment has arrived. I tell her to send him to my office and tell him my door is open, so just to walk in. Bob walks in looking both apprehensive and excited. We first engage in some small talk, and then get into exactly what type of business he is hoping to start. He is your average white male around my age. He tells me he's been working for a roofer for 3 years since he got out of the service. Light bulb goes on in my head, and I immediately asked him if he was in Vietnam. He tells me he did 2 tours there. Hallelujah, in my head. He says he is a great roofer and does excellent work, but knows it's not the type of occupation that lends itself to a healthy, long-lasting life, so therefore he wants to own his company. He then tells me he does not know the first thing about the intricacies of running a business, but that his wife is the owner's assistant, and if the truth be told, she runs the business while the owner is out screwing around all day. He says if he can start the business, she will be his partner and operations manager, but they will have to hire an accountant. This is music to my ears, because one of the owners is a Vietnam-era veteran, and the other owner is a woman, and both have extensive experience in the business they are looking to start. This one is going to be a slam dunk, and I know it. It's rare to have easy sales of proposals. At the beginning of this story, I explained the qualities I needed in a company or person in order to work for them. Before I accepted the sales position, I questioned SBL about what the approximate loaded costs were for SBL to create a proposal. He told me that excluding commissions, it was roughly $150 to $250, and that if the client wanted us to shop the proposal to private investors, there would be an additional 2 points on any financing we were able to procure. I think SBL could sometimes recognize that I had concerns if what I was doing was the ethical thing to do. Anytime he had a conversation with SBL about business, he would invariably end with, "Remember, you are assisting people in achieving their life's dreams." I explained to this client everything about the quality of the proposals we put together, and in most cases, our clients would submit the proposals to the Small Business Administration because that was the lender that had the best terms, bar none. I explained to them about the points involved if they requested we shop it to private investors. Inevitably, potential clients always asked two questions immediately after the pitch was done. How much will it cost? And what are the chances we will be able to get the actual financing that is being requested? As expected, Bob immediately asked these questions. I told him in this case the cost would be $750, and his chances of getting the finances was extremely promising, and that if I were to put it in a different way, he had about a 95% chance of obtaining the loan. I said this with confidence, and he immediately wrote me a check for $750, and I felt happy for him and proud of myself. We completed the proposal, and Bob submitted it to the SBA. He came back about a month later saying that the loan was denied on the basis that what he was asking for did not include enough money for working capital. I asked him if he read the complete denial down to the section that the proposal could be resubmitted with different financials. I then explained to him that this basically meant he got the loan and there would be more money coming to him once we adjusted the amount of working capital needed. Working capital was the cornerstone for success in the eyes of the SBA. This was because most small businesses failed within the first 5 years due to the lack of working capital to pay the employees themselves and have the necessary inventory on hand in order to be viable until their business began to thrive. The last thing any lender, including the SBA, wanted to see was their money spent on a business doomed to fail. They wanted to see enough working capital for 5 years, and in cases like Bob's, they would lend money that they thought had the highest probability of ensuring success. Bob resubmitted the revised proposal, and he received an extra $75,000 in working capital on top of what he asked for. SBL and Associates profited $500 from this deal, and I received $250 in commission for that one sale. In 1973, $250 was considerably worth more than it is now. Over the next 3 months, I was easily the top salesman for the company, and was making a lot more money than my college-educated friends. The other salespeople were struggling and prompted SBL to call me and find out my appointment schedule so he could sit in on some appointments. I would handle one appointment while he observed and vice versa. He was trying to figure out what was in my approach that created success. Remember, SBL thought I was a natural, so he gave me some brief training before sending me on my own. The day arrived when we were going to observe each other. I went first and did my usual presentation. When the client asked about the cost, I told him $850, and when he asked about his chances for success, I cautioned him by telling them that at best he had a 60% chance of obtaining financing from the SBA, and even less of a chance from a private investor. The client said he would have to think about it and that he would let me know either way. Now it was my turn to observe SBL and his approach and explanation of what went into a proposal. It was very similar to mine. The shock came when he quoted $1,850 to prepare the proposal, and that the client had a 90% chance of obtaining the financing. I was listening. I knew that I would have quoted $900 tops, and at the best he would have a 30% chance of obtaining the financing from anybody. I would have told the client that he was being unrealistic and to rethink what he wanted to do for a living. After the appointments were finished, SBL gave me his critique. He said, "I already knew that you were an extraordinary salesperson. However, I would have done a couple of things differently. Number one, the fee that you quoted the client was much lower than it should have been. And secondly, the 60% chance that the client would actually obtain the necessary funding was completely ridiculous. I found his comments insulting, and his behavior made me question myself for accepting his job offer. Quite frankly, I could feel myself reaching the boiling point. I asked him in a way that betrayed my inner feelings, how did you determine the fee for the client that you interviewed? In fact, what matrix or standards do you follow when determining the fee for any client? I know that his business was not a charity organization and profit were the name of the game, but his answer absolutely floored me. It is really quite simple. As I interview a potential client, I take a quick look at their personal financial statement. There are two things I'm looking for, and that is the amount of money they have in their checking and savings account. Once I have that information, I try to get as much as I can without blowing them out the door. I can already see that your next question will be the method I use to come up with the percentage chance of success. There is a simple answer to that also. I never say anything lower than a 90% chance of success, whether or not it's true. I am in this business and to make money and more than I will ever need. I was overcome with anger and shame. I was angry because the guy had totally manipulated me with this bullshit line of we help people fulfill their life's dreams, and shame because a lot of people probably have been seriously ripped off by this guy, and though I knew that I should not feel the way I did, I somehow felt partly responsible for it. I could no longer restrain my anger. I called him a low-life mother effer, among many other profanities, and told him that he can go ahead and fire me and forget he ever knew me. I could not believe that he actually tried to put a rational spin on his methods. Unfortunately, back when this was happening, I had yet to learn how to control my explosive anger. I ripped off my suit jacket in a blind rage. I rushed him and put my hands around his throat, choking him. I was gripped by rage, and I could see by the look in his eyes that he was gripped by fear, and in all honesty, it was the result I was looking for. As I was choking him, I said to him, meaning every word, I quit. You had better hope that we never cross paths again, because I'll beat the living shit out of you for the shame I now feel and for the people whose money you stole by giving them false hopes. I let go of him, walked out the door, got in my car, and drove like a madman all the way home. I recall watching 60 Minutes about a month later, and one of the show's segments were about the dramatic rise in companies similar to SLP&Associates. They were investigating how these companies justified the fees that they were charged. It was not long after the airing of the show that the SBA put out a warning that as far as small business proposals were concerned, that $800 was the maximum anyone should pay to so-called financial experts to prepare a proposal. SPL and Associates were never interviewed, but he went quickly and quietly out of business. You will never learn about sharks like SPL in college.